Hey there, Whip. Yo, check
it. God gave skills to a brother named Nish, making mad music was only my way.
Hey there, welcome to Frank's Tech Help. Today I'm going to be doing a 5-week review of the Traxxas Rustler 4x4 VXL. I'm going to go over some of the most commonly broken pieces that I've had to replace. And we're going to do a complete teardown and rebuild of this vehicle using upgraded parts. So stay tuned for all of that. Before we get into anything else, I want to go over the body here real quick. You can see I've literally jumped this car, man, I don't know, well over 100 times. And like hardcore jumps, you know, like I bashed the crap out of this thing. You can see it's fairly well beaten. All the crap, the body is falling apart. You see over there, disconnecting there. Center of it's held out pretty well. The complete back end, both of these sides are ripping apart. You can see it's completely disconnected there. And the wheelie bar had a tendency to get stuck up under the back tail right there until I took too many hits on the back tail and it peeled it up literally. You can see this thing's beat. But hey, look at it this way, the wheelie bar doesn't stick anymore. Everything in here is fairly solid as far as the design and everything goes, and has held up really well. So it's mostly the parts that are broken that you can expect to be broken as far as that goes. Now, one issue that I did have is that the battery keeps popping out. And I'm using a 75C, so I do have the extension bar, and I use a piece of hard foam, you know, to lock the battery into place. But that wasn't really so much the problem as this bar. If it gets hit hard enough, it releases. So I actually took a pin from my 2-wheel drive Traxxas Rustler with a body clip and drilled a tiny hole down into the battery thing there. Let me pop this open for you, like that. So, there you go. This extra little part of the pin right there, if you don't clip that off, it will puncture your battery. So that's a way to secure the battery in there. So that was one of the biggest. This is a more recent problem. This didn't really happen in the beginning so much, but now that I guess it's broken in. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and set this vehicle aside and quickly cover what I've broken over the past 5 weeks, first 5 weeks of owning this vehicle. Within less than 3 hours of drive time, I burned through my first spur gear. And about 2.5 hours further drive time, I burned through another plastic spur gear. I decided to upgrade to test out some metal spur gears. There's a 50 tooth and a 54 tooth spur gear. And very promptly ate up my 11 tooth pinion. Let me zoom in, you guys see it a little bit better here as far as that goes. So promptly ate up my 11 tooth pinion. So from there I put the 17 tooth in that comes with the original packaging, and it did really well, but it started overheating, which is why I put fans in. So I have not run this gear since then. The biggest issue, the reason that these burn out, because everything was loose. I'll go over some of the, I have videos posted of this, but the rear drive shaft mount right there, the screw kept coming loose. So you can use some Loctite, silicone, whatever. I used a little professional super glue. Have not had an issue with it again, but this is part of the reason that the spur gear started stripping. And then also the slipper clutch bolt started coming loose, just kind of kept wiggling its way loose. I put a little drop of super glue in there. This motor mount right here is the biggest culprit to the spur gear stripping. Make sure this is tight, 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 tight. Now that I've had this in place, you can probably see rust on it. I've been running this thing for probably 2 or 3 weeks at least with the same spur gear now. So to whereas the original one's got 2.5, 3 hours at best, this one's probably seen, I don't know, 40 plus hours on one plastic spur gear now. So just pay close attention to that if you're researching this to purchase it, is that the motor mount and these few points are kind of critical as far as trying to maintain, you know, not stripping out your spur gear as far as that goes. Okay, so the next thing to go in this scenario was that my A-arm, the inner mount for my A-arm split. I hit a pole doing about, oddly enough, like 10 or 15 miles per hour, maybe 10 at the most, and completely just ripped the rod through there. See if you guys can see that right there. So I just put a pic in there just to show you, have a little definition as far as what it did, but that's, you know, hit it too hard and ripped it out. So ended up putting something temporary in. I'll be using some RPMs today as far as this project goes. Then I managed to completely rip an axle end where the tire screws into place. Get this in the right angle for you. Managed to rip it completely out of the socket. You can see kind of how it's, I mean, it really, the power, this thing's got a lot of force and a lot of power, and it just completely ripped it out of place. So, and that is on the back as far as that goes. So it's probably, you know, doing wheelies and stuff like that. It put a lot of pressure on it. Beyond that, the next one that I broke would be the CVD, one of the axle mounts. I call it a universal joint, but you know, kind of like in a drive shaft. But so yeah, that pivot point right there ended up breaking, and this is on the drive differential side, inside of the car, as opposed to the outer axle like the other one went. So next in line, I decided to purchase some supposedly hardened steel axles off of eBay. And this is a buyer beware moment. If you see these on eBay, don't buy them. $18 to $20 for a set of 4, and man, they worked within 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, ended up ripping the end out of another. Man, look at that rod. Can you see how warped that thing is? I mean, that sucker is bent. And then it ended up completely just ripping out of the joint right there. So the seller refunded me pretty much without any questions. I guess they knew as well. So just, if you see these, do not buy them. They're complete garbage. Also, the little pins that are supposed to keep this slide mechanism in place. Yeah. Well, hey, look, there's another piece of something falling out of it. So anyway, stay away from those. So you may be asking yourself, if you haven't read the description already, exactly what what on earth could be in my magic little $1 plastic box with a beautiful Traxxas sticker on it? Could be upgrades? I think so. Let's release the beast. See what we're working with. Haha. Man, have I been looking forward to this. All kinds of goodies. Gonna be doing some shock towers, carriers and hubs, blocks, shocks, some GPM green axles there, some RPM A-arms, and front bulkhead, RPM plastic front bulkhead, and hot racing metal aluminum rear bulkhead with a aluminum cap to the back of the car right there. So here we go, dig into all of this. Oh, one more bonus. Hopefully this is going to work. I picked up a set of Slash 4x4 bumpers, obviously because the other one's pretty much pilled completely, and not to mention the front of my bumper's smashed, so this will fit in there just nicely. So we're gonna kind of convert it a little bit there from the Rustler to a little bit of Slashism, if you will, front bumper there. Now the question is begged, will I lose my wheelie bar in the back if I do this? Yes, you will lose the wheelie bar in the back. However, you'll have a nice rear end there. So there we have it. That's everything that's going into this build today. It's going to be massive, and I will try to make this happen as quickly as possible, I promise. Like I said, it's not too late to go grab that sandwich if you want. Some chips. Bring me a drink while you're at it, please. So I'm going to go ahead and get this stuff off the table, get it put away, and I'm going to start breaking down the car and be right back. So in lieu of time, I might play some music for you guys here, one of my tracks that I created, and do a little fast forward action, and I'll pop back in if I have any critical points to point out to you. So hope you guys enjoy.
Right. It's radio.
Okay, so as you saw in the video, I removed the screws, 3 from the bottom and the front to remove the bumpers off the front and the back. So it's 2 screws, 3 down below. And I find this very interesting. I go to remove the back plate. I've never really messed with this before, but it's very simply 2 screws holding the entire system in back there for the wheelie bar and the spring for when you hit the ground and everything. So I'm amazed that that really is amazing that that little piece right there is able to sustain that much force as far as it getting pounded. So I'm kind of examining my differential here to see if I've got like any oil, any leaks or anything like that. I know I have some shock oil on there for my shocks popping the tops repeatedly. So everything looks fairly good. Once you get the bumpers dismantled, taken off, you have your little plates back here with the pins holding in the A-arms. So you can go ahead and drop your plate, drop your pins out, drop your A-arms down. You will need to unscrew your shocks as well. And this axle that I warned you guys about earlier is so bent and warped, I can't even get it out of the carrier back here. I mean, the bearings are pretty much, the rod is so bent that the bearings don't want to release, and it doesn't want to, I don't know, maybe, and it's not letting go. Alright, so anyway, like I said, be warned as far as that goes. Same thing in the front. You can go ahead and pull the plate in the front. You do have an extra screw right here. Let me knock that out. Now that I've got the A-arms disconnected from beneath, you know, I could go through the process of disconnecting each of these and kind of showing you that, but I'm doing the shock towers, doing new shocks, doing pretty much everything. So I'm just going to go ahead and break it down from here. One thing about doing this in an entire session, doing all these parts in a session, is that you can pretty much just, hey, it looks like a frog. I'm sorry, I love that. I can't read. Watch, ready? I'm a crab. Okay, I'm a dork. Anyway, yeah, so the nice part about that is if you're doing the whole upgrade at once, you don't have to take apart all the small stuff, but it's relatively simple. It's all straightforward. Next, you'll come in to your shock towers, and there'll be 4 bolts right there, 2 on the top and 2 just below that you'll need to unscrew to release the shock tower from the body here. Another note that I'd like to add here is that for your rear shock tower, when you go to pull the 4 screws out, the 2 on the top are shorter than the 2 on the bottom. Remember that. So as I was taking these out, I discovered, paying close attention, they actually look slightly different in the width, maybe not, but so you can kind of see the difference in the 2 there. And there's the shock tower out of place now. So all of this right here is pretty much on the replacement list for this project. So alright, so at this point I'm going to take a look at the front and the rear differential and do a little service on that, a little maintenance. Simply slides out of the front right here, like so. Same thing on the back, like so. So go ahead and set these aside for a second. And immediately, as soon as I slid this out, I don't know if you can hear this, it sounds really gritty, so this is pretty filthy. So the basic concept here is to come in, you want to clean out all the crud, and see if I can get that in the right angle for you guys there. So yeah, you just want to take a Q-tip and come in and clean out all this crud, thick, built up stuff. And yeah, man, that's pretty hardcore. So 5 weeks of hardcore play there. Once you get this cleaned up, what I want to do is I'm going to pop off this bearing again on the outside right there, and I want to inspect the orbital gears inside of the differential gear. So you can, when you spin it, can't really hear it, but I've been having some clacking, like upon pressure, full speed and stuff. You can kind of start hearing it clack a little bit more. So I do want to take this apart and check the oil and the condition of everything inside of there. So let's see. Alright, so now that I have the 4 screws out, you can basically lift the lid off here. Kind of what you're looking for, you want to, first signs of damage or whatever, kind of grit, same thing as in the gear part of the differential there. And don't really see, this actually looks really good for what it is. It's very gooey, I don't see much grit. From there, I'm going to pull out the orbital gear here. And so as you can see there, everything looks good, kind of in place. We'll set that down for a moment. And if you wanted to, if you're cleaning this out, if you did have grit or whatever, just go through and clean everything up nicely and get it prepped for your bearing grease that goes back in. So then on the bottom, just pop this up and you can remove the drive part of this and inspect that. And as you can see in there, everything looks really good. I mean, that I don't see any grit at all. So just kind of give you a look on that. So you'll want to inspect that as well. All of the teeth, everything look to be in good shape there. So I'm going to keep this as it is as far as the grease and everything goes. And when you go to put this back in, you just have to make sure it's aligned into those 2 little slots on the outside like that. Push the pin in a little bit. So now after inspecting this, the sill that I showed you a moment ago that's moving around actually is supposed to go on the top of this. So I'm going to pill this right here. And you want to place it inside of this. Line up the screw holes once again. Now that everything is cleaned up, let's say at this point you're ready to put it back together. I'm going to be upgrading other stuff, but for this scenario for you guys, just go ahead and put your bearing grease in there. Once again, I'm using high-temp bearing grease, and I put more than what was in there because it was all broken down. It was really gritty, so you don't want to put too much in here because it will have to work harder for that viscosity breakdown from the heat. It'll take a little, it'll have to warm up a little bit basically, but it will slow it down some. So just kind of use your better judgment. I made sure that there was more than what there was in there because there was barely anything in there before. But there's a lot of space for it to expand and fling outward, once it heats up, to kind of clear out of the way there. So that's good enough for me. So at this point you can start reversing this process to put it back together, but I'm going to do some more upgrades here, so I'm going to set these aside now that they're done. So the next step in this process for me is going to be the front, replacing the front and rear bulkhead with my upgraded parts. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the back here. Flip this over, lay it down, make sure everything, you're not forcing pressure on anything. Alright, so one thing to note on the screws for the rear bulkhead, that the 2 top ones up here are the shorter ones and the 2 longer ones go on the bottom side of that. And then these 2 really tiny ones that screw into the bottom of the differential are fairly evident as far as that goes. So we can go ahead and remove the back of the bulkhead here, the differential, and then from here the differential housing actually disconnects from the bulkhead there. And you want to inspect this. Got the gear inside of there and the bearing. So you just pop that assembly out and kind of see, look for the grease, any grit, and clean this up as you see necessary. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and start reversing the breakdown process and installing the new parts. This is the rear bulkhead, HR Racing rear bulkhead. Flip this over, kind of get this into place. And also you want to make sure that this gear right here, your rear slipper clutch and everything is connected properly to the front of the car. Okay, there. So I'm going to make sure that this front, you can feel it spinning and that it's pushed all the way in, because otherwise it will catch on the end of this housing. It'll be pretty evident when you try to go to turn, so just make sure that you have the play in there. And once again, remember the longer ones go on the bottom and the shorter ones go on the top of this assembly. Alright, I got the 2 bottom screws in there. Flip it back over. Go ahead and move the old unit out of the way there. And we'll get our upright, the rear end of our rear differential housing kind of slid in place there. Make sure it butts up properly, that everything is enclosed on this back end right there. Looks nice. And as I mentioned before, the shorter screws go on the top. Go ahead and lock those down into place here. And you're going to put your 2 smaller screws into the bottom of the rear differential for that. Get those 2 started. So after you have all of those screws locked down, you can come back in and line up your gear with the bearing in it right there. Just kind of slide it into place and make sure that it locks into position properly. Spin it around. There we go. So you see that it's locked into the tab right there. And from that point, now you start the reverse build. Bring in your rear differential gear with your grease, everything in place. It's ready to mate right there. That new grease will kind of hold that tacky kind of into place until you get back around to putting the screws in. And from this point, we're going to come in and remove the front bulkhead. You have 4 screws, 1, 2 there, 2 more down on either side right here, kind of down in a little crevice there, and we'll go ahead and knock that out. So another note here on the screws, as I'm removing the 4 screws from the front bulkhead, the 2 forward screws up here close to the front differential are longer, and the 2 that go back here are shorter. So once again, just make a note of that, because you could crack the frame or something like that if you put them in incorrectly. So now that those screws are out, you're going to flip it over. You have 2 more, which are attached to the underside of the differential, kind of like they were in the back there. So we're going to remove these real quick. Alright, so after you have all of the screws removed, you will need to disconnect the linkage for the servo. And you can do it at the servo, but you might lose your position as far as where it's turned exactly, so I would suggest doing it from the link side, just below where it connects to the steering. And that should release the front bulkhead from the body at this point. Yeah, there we go. Flip that over there. So you see the underworkings of the bulkhead there. You will want to slide the gear out. This is the front mount of your drive shaft. There we go. Give it a little wiggle and the whole thing comes out right there. And as you remember, I cleaned this up a few minutes ago, so that all looks like it's still in really good condition there. So the next step in this process is we have our new part that I'm going to be installing, and let me switch out my tip here. We're going to remove the steering control system here and mount it onto this one. Alright, so after you remove the rest of the steering mechanism here, you do have bearings in here, so you want to kind of check those. Take a quick look, make sure that everything looks good with those. And those are fairly tiny. Yeah, everything inside of there looks like it's still intact, so those bearings look like they're in good shape. Alright, so one other thing to note, that there are 2 bearings that go in the bottom of this, and mine ended up stuck on the tower, so I had to kind of pry them loose. So what you want to do is remove these, and you can go ahead and place them on the new tower, slide them down there. As far as they'll go, just kind of, they seat right there. And so that way, when you come back in to put your steering mechanism back in place, you just flip it over there to start with. Pop this back in. That's going to go back on the same way that it came off. And when you get down under it right here, just make sure it seats down. See how one is seated on the bearing and one is not, so just make sure they both seat down fully. And then from there, you want to come back in and put your screws back into place here. Lock those bearings and the steering mechanism into place. And take our screw, go ahead and put it in there, and get this lined up with our driver bit here. Just kind of come in at the angle and connect right there. and give you a little closer look of the angle that I went in to get to that. When you're lining this back up, don't just kind of pop it like that and put your screws back in. Make sure these two towers are seated kind of in that little divot right there, because if they're not, I don't know if you can see the gap right there, but they need to be seated down kind of like that. And so once you have that locked kind of back into place and aligned, you can go ahead and slide your drive shaft back in and connect it to the rear mount. Right back there. Hold that in place, and then take the rear half of your front differential, come in, you have to move the drive shaft around a little bit to get it to line up properly. In the right position, there we go. So make sure your screw holes line up, and there's a stopper right there so that you know that it's pushed all the way back. Once again, the two longer screws out of the 4 that you took out here go into the front. Go ahead and lock these down real quick. Next, we're going to flip this over and we're going to come in with our bottom plate right here. Fits like snug like that right there. We'll put in our 3 primary screws. Once you have all your screws locked into the bottom there, flip it over here, and we can actually go ahead and place our forward housing for the differential, front differential into place. And I'm going to be using a GPM aluminum shock tower for this. It comes with some screws for various shock attachments and such. So we're going to simply slide that into place like that and use the original screws back in here. Once again, remember that the 2 short ones go in the top, the 2 long ones go in the bottom. As you can see here, I've got the shock towers installed now, got the screws locked into place. Same thing on the back here. Rear differential housings locked into place on that upper section now. And the next step from here will be to install our A-arms. And the important part here will be to make sure that the indentions fit, like on the front side, the shocks mount to the front up here. So you want to make sure this cutout, this groove, is for your axle to fit into place. So these 2 will go forward. The 2 in the rear will also go forward. You can see the cutouts for the axles there, so just make sure that your placement is proper before you install all of this. Since I'm going to be installing this kind of upside down, I'll flip these. And I'll flip this over and go from there. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and take our A-arms, kind of slide them in place here, go ahead and put our pins in, get these locked in. Go ahead and get our front plate put back into the position that holds the rods for the A-arms. So I did get a cover plate, a Hot Racing aluminum cover plate, which is super nice. And if I were going to keep the old bumper system in place, then I would have used this in regards to that. But since that's not the case, I'm going to put this aside. And I'm going to be installing, as I mentioned before, the Slash Ultimate bumper. So I'm going to pop this into position here, get this lined up properly. Now go ahead and insert the rear screw here. This will help align these 2 top holes. Once you tighten this one down, and kind of lock it into place and allow those other 2 screws to go in more easily. So once you get the 2 bottom screws in, you're going to want to come back up to the top and go ahead and place in the 2 top mounting screws. After the back bumper is installed, we'll go ahead and come around to the front here. Take our new Slash Ultimate front bumper and get it positioned into place here. So for this process, I'd go ahead and put the 2 top screws in first. It'll help it stay in better alignment as far as that goes. Now we've come to the point where I'm going to be installing the bearing carriers, C-hubs, all of that, the new hardware for the front and the back. So go ahead and position these so they just fit on the lower end of the A-arm like that. Slide our screws through. I'm really amazed at how easy to work on this cart is. You definitely don't have to have a ton of skill, just a little motivation and remembering where you put all of your screws, of course, is a super key element. So once you get all of your carrier hubs and stuff into position, you want to go ahead and get your linkage back into place. And because I installed the front bumper first, I can't actually use my screwdriver because it's at a kind of a bad angle there. So I'm going to use the original Traxxas wrench that came with my kit just to tighten the two front ones down. So as the next step, we'll go ahead and connect our linkage in. So for the next part, it's going to be axles, and this is fairly simple as well. As you know, just the reverse of putting them in. I'm doing an upgrade here. You'll want to insert the actual end of the axle into the carrier through the bearings first on that side, as I destroy everything around my desk. And then you'll want to insert the inside. And also pay attention, on one side there are no threads, and on the other side there are threads. So I'm going to turn the threaded side towards me and line it up with that hole. If I can get that in their proper position there. Right there. And now that will allow me to insert the screw. Alright, so we're almost done here. I just made a completely rookie mistake and I had to correct it. So if somebody spots it, great. You can get a laugh out of it. If not, I'm not saying anything. So we'll, and it doesn't have to do with the shocks. So I can tell you that. But go ahead and get these lined up here. Start putting the screws in. Alright, last but certainly not least, we're going to put our lock nuts, our locking hex bolts on here. Alright, so as you're reinstalling the bolts, make sure you put your little shims from the original axles back on there, little spacers. And also make sure you pull your axle all the way out when you go to put the locking nut on there. So this locking nut also has a surface. One side is completely flat. You can see right there. The other side has a slightly raised space, so that raised space is going to go inwards. It's going to give you a little space against those bearings there to help that out. So then you just kind of spin it around here, get it in the right position, make sure it's pushed all the way out, the axle's pushed all the way against the back bearings there, and then you'll just come in and tighten this down like that. And let's go ahead and slap the tires on here and see what's going on. Alright, so there you have it. It's the complete teardown and rebuild of the Traxxas Rustler 4x4 VXL, including upgraded parts. This is going to be like a brand new car for me, because everything is fairly well worn out at this point, even just after a measly 5 weeks. But granted, like I said, I put this car through hell and back, and really the last thing I need is a new body on this thing. So it's looking kind of rough, but hey, it's nice under the hood, isn't it? So, alright, I hope this video helped you guys out, and as always, oh, wait, what? Oh, you want me to take it out and drive it? Oh, I get it. Okay. Alright, yeah, I guess it wouldn't be an upgrade video without at least taking it for a test drive, so let's do it. Alright guys, for real, there you have it. It's the complete teardown and rebuild of the Traxxas Rustler 4x4 VXL. And as you saw, I got some good tumbles going on there. The shocks, everything is beautiful. This thing drives super well. I'm extremely happy that I decided to do the upgrades, invest the time in it, and to be honest with you, I probably spent more time, about 5 times the amount of time, shooting and editing this video for you guys than I did actually upgrading this car. So, you know, it's all relatively easy. Everything's pretty straightforward. The main thing is just to remember where your screws go, set them aside, put them with whatever parts you're pulling off, so you know. Anyway, I hope this video helped you guys out and inspires you to maybe do something to your vehicle. And please post, comment, rate, subscribe, all that good jazz. And as always, thanks for watching Frank's Tech Help. Peace. I'm a crab.
Yo, check it. God gave skills to a brother named Nish, making